Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of two September webinars, Social Media Compliance. Before introducing today's speaker, I have a few housekeeping items I need to address. This webinar is 1 hour in length and is being recorded. Within the next week, you'll receive a link to the recording and a post-webinar survey that we appreciate you completing. Please keep your mics muted and turn off your video so that a focus stays on our speaker. We ask that you put your questions in the chat box. We will be monitoring to those and posing the questions as we go. However, we have time at the end, so if any aren't addressed, we'll get to those later. Today, Ann Robinson is going to provide an overview of the challenges, rules, and guidance surrounding social media compliance in the securities industry. Ann is the Chief Compliance Officer at Farmers Financial Solutions. Having worked in the securities industry space for many years, she brings broker, dealer, and vendor perspective and is an expert in compliance matters. Additionally, Ann is the communications and PR trustee for the SILA Foundation. And she's also an active participant in many committees, subcommittees, task forces, and working groups at SILA and within the securities industry. Please join me in welcoming Ann Robinson to our virtual webinar stage.
Hi,
Welcome,
thank you.
Ann.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to go through, we will start out a little high level. As Mary Ellen said, please drop questions in the chat feature if you would like any information. And we will be sharing not only the recording, but the slides after if anyone has any interest. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to cover a couple topics. So we'll go high level, types of social media, a regulatory overview, the use of social media, and then some regulatory actions. This is still a hot topic. Social media has been around for quite a while, but it is ever changing. So we will only get, again, it's an overview. We're going to get a little bit into it, and then we'll go from there. So FINRA actually had a target exam in 2021 where they defined these different areas. So you'll see that social media is any website or application that enables the user to create and share content or participate in social networking. It includes, but is not limited to, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, Twitch. They actually categorize social media communications to mean communication with the public, including provision of any content advertising about or on behalf of the firm pursuant to an arrangement or a third party through social media. And they actually classify what an influencer is. It means a third party with whom the firm contacts or compensates social media communications. So just to highlight some of the platforms, we'll keep this pretty conversational. FINRA actually defines it for business use. You can actually see some of these are going to lean more toward business. As you can imagine, LinkedIn is where you're going to get a lot of your business communication. You may have some, representatives or agents who are very active on a Twitter or Instagram. Facebook is also a means of communication. As we all know, people have started moving into TikTok. So there are a number of individuals who are doing TikTok videos for marketing and other reasons. TikTok has really blown up over the last couple of years, but this is a type of social media and would need to be archived. So we're going to go over the regulatory overview. I'm going to focus primarily on FINRA just because of the amount of time we have here. There are also other actions from the SEC, but we'll go through FINRA really quickly, kind of high level. So FINRA has communications with the public rule, so it's 2210. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. They've also put out a number of notices that are specific to social media, but because a social media platform would be a communication with the public, it would fall under the communication rules, which requires supervision. So you'll see here that there are different types of content and that the way you supervise them are a little bit different. So static content is typically posted for the longer term and lacks the immediacy of a real-time conversation. Static content needs to be approved by registered principal prior to use, and it may be required to be filed with FINRA. So there's actually some pretty good outlines. When you think about static content, we think of your business card information. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, it would have my name, my firm information. It may have some disclosure on there or about to how to look me up on broker check. That content is static. It doesn't change very frequently. It would be pre-approved. Think of it as a business card. So that information is static and be prior to use. You also have content that's more interactive. So interactive content is typically real time. It could be the dialogue. It does not require prior approval. If you think about that being real time, it would be very difficult to have prior approval. You would actually supervise it similar to you do correspondence or email. If the firm allows interactive communication, then you have to have in your supervisor procedures. So you need to make sure you have a procedure set up to cover if you allow this interactive content. At this point, a lot of firms do allow the content. You can always get data feeds of that content later and archive it. You do need training. So even if you don't allow your individuals to use social media, it's good to train them on what they can do or what they can't do within social media. It's very valuable to let them know exactly upfront what's accepted and what is not accepted. How you're going to surveil the communications. So similar to email review, how are you going to get that data? How are you going to run it through the system? How are you going to test it for compliance to make sure they're actually following your policies and procedures? What actions are taken if there's a problem detected? So if someone puts a post out and then you're looking at it after the facts, it's interactive, then you want to actually have a policy showing how you're going to require that individual to delete the content. You may want to add in there how you confirm that it's been deleted or actions that are taken if they violate their policies. And then documentation of any findings or corrective action. So should you find someone violating the social media policy, maybe they didn't disclose their LinkedIn profile to you, then, how would you actually do a corrective action? Is it a letter of caution? What are you going to do with that individual to make sure that they're actually complying with your policies and procedures? So they also have third-party post. So record keeping also applies to third-party posts at interactive forums. So that you must ensure that third-party posts are properly identified and handled with your firm procedures, and that customer complaints or instructions are all supervised. Third-party posts are generally not subject to the advertising rule unless you become entangled, as what the vendor calls it. And if a firm endorses or approves a third-party content, that's where you get your entanglement. So if there is a third party that's not affiliated with my firm, but I am engaging in or endorsing those posts, I have then become entangled with third party, which could actually tie me to the vendor advertising rules. You can also link to third-party websites. So if you link to a third-party website and there's something false or misleading, then there are red flags, and you actually are tying yourself to that content. So we talked about entanglement. So here you'll see if you link to a third-party site and you become entangled with them, vendor may deem you to have adopted that content, and it indicates the site endorses or firm could be deemed to be entangled. So your third-party content then really becomes your content. You're actually part of that, and that's by linking to the site. So it's really important that if you do have firm sites, you actually go through your marketing approval process before you link to any third-party websites. That could be partners, it could be affiliates, but you want to make sure that you're really reviewing any of those third-party websites because the content becomes yours once you link to it. Suitability. So just like trade approval, when you're putting information out there, there is a suitability rule. So you need to develop your interactive electronic communications for specific products. So if you have individuals who are making recommendations for an annuity, for example, that is a specific product, and you need to determine how you're going to supervise them. You want to prohibit interactive electronic community that are recommended that have a specific product unless it's been prior approved. So if I'm out here, I'm posting on annuities, it should have had a registered principal approval before because it does become a recommendation at that point. So you want your approved template prior to allowing the interactive content. And then just like any advertising, it needs to be fair and balanced. So as you notice here, Fenner outlines what that means. So the communication rule, so social media, email, or print, it must be fair and balanced and complete and not omit any material information. So just putting a portion of information out there is a violation of the fair and balanced rule. It can't be false, misleading, promissory, exaggerated, or unwarranted statements or claims are prohibited. Communications may not predict or project future performance. Material information in communication may not be buried in footnotes. Statements must be clear with a balanced treatment of risk and potential benefits, and communications must be appropriate for the audience. So that is one thing you have to think about when you're on social media. You're not aware of every individual. So you have to really consider your audience on what network or what platform you're putting out communications for. And probably the biggest one that you see fines on are books and records. So firms and their registered reps must retain records of communications related to business as such. The business as such requirements based on the content of the communication, not the type or device or technology to receive or send them communication. These records must be preserved for a period of not less than 3 years. Vendors' advertising rules do not apply to an associated person's personal use of social media, and firms must educate their personnel on the difference between the two. So you do have the ability to have a Facebook page. That could be your personal Facebook page. However, if an individual starts to post about business, then he has to actually may have crossed the line and actually using his personal page for business as such. So it's very important that you train your individuals that are registered with your firm to know the difference between the two, and then to not commingle that information. So if you've not disclosed a page as business, don't post business items on that page. That could be as simple as actually putting what firm you're associated with could perceive that you're actually holding yourself out to be a registered representative on your personal page. And if the firm is unable to retain books and records, that is a violation because you haven't disclosed that. These violations are pretty big. And so this includes social media. It also includes off-channel communications. I know there's different sessions on that, so we're not going to get into it. But if you look at the amount of fines that have been, implemented since September of 2020, it's 3.5 billion in fines for failure to maintain compliant communications. This could be the chat within your social media platform. It could be texting, or it could be another chat feature. But it is really important that you actually make sure your firm is gathering and meeting this books and records requirement, because these are pretty heavy fines that are out there. So now we'll go into the use. And we'll talk high level about what vendors defines as a finfluencer. So a finfluencer is a social media influencer. Benner has actually been very involved in this. You can actually see there was a comment from Bill St. Louis, who's the executive vice president, head of enforcement. As investors increasingly use social media to inform their financial decision, Benner's role in communicating with the public are essentially critical. Benner will continue to consider whether firms are using practices and maintaining supervisory systems that are reasonably designed to address the risks related to social media influencer programs. So we are seeing more of a focus in, with FINRA. This is because the platforms are changing. I remember years ago, we were having reps asking to use social media platforms. It was typically LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been around for quite some time, and you've seen more and more platforms come out. As these platforms comes out, TikTok, for example, you have to make sure you can meet your regulatory obligations. So we did put some study information in here. It's interesting to see where people get their data from. So if you look at 58% of those under 40 have invested in a high risk investment product based on hype, social media, and the news and lines behind their investment decision. Over 50% of individuals are getting their advice from social media. 62 18 to 29-year-olds follow a social media influencer, and 74% say they would trust their advice. And 9 in 10 young followers have encouraged to change their financial behavior. So some pretty big numbers here when you look at who's relying on social media to make their decisions for investing. If you break it down a little bit further here, you can actually see that by generation, Gen Z, Millennials, and Gen X, social media accounts for 48% for Gen Z for their investment decisions. If you drop down to the bottom, only 30% for financial advisors. So certain generations are evaluating social media decisions over a financial provider. You can also see here there's financial apps, friends, where they're getting their information from, but quite a bit are based on items that are on websites or social media if you look at the top there. And that's pretty consistent as you go down between millennials are 42% versus their financial professionals are 39%. And the only where you see it a little bit higher is for Gen X, you have about 38% are actually using a financial professional, and 26% say they're using social media for investment decisions. So depending on the different age group, we do see a little bit leaning more toward that social media profile where they're actually pulling data in. And if anyone would like this information, I did include the links within the PowerPoint here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to share these afterwards also. So with the FCA, you'll see here their directors, and we've seen a growing number of ads falling short of the guidance we have to place to stop consumer harm. We're updating our guidance to clarify what we expect of firms when marketing financial products online. And for touting those products illegally, we'll be taking action against you. So we are seeing not just FINRA, not just the SEC, they're all taking stances here for making sure that these products are properly disclosed. And I did include here, if you are interested in social media writing training, you want to train your agents, there are a number of, as you can actually see, regulatory guidance put out there, even starting back in 2007. So I'm going to call out one of these. I actually think it's great for training. I've actually used it myself to train my advertising principals when they're looking at this. So Regulatory Notice 19-31. If you go into it, it actually gives you samples of what FINRA is looking at. So here to the right, you can see the sample. It is included in the notice. They call out, you can see the highlighted at the bottom, based on disclosure, and they tell you what is wrong with the example. It's great for training. You can use it to train your reps, train your back office people who are reviewing this type of disclosure before it's going out. But you'll see here, FINRA calls out in this example, the only information required for compliance is the highlighted text. The other information is not required by FINRA and may distract from the presentation of the required information. FINRA recognizes there are multiple ways to address the prominence of required information, and electronic media and design innovations may open up new possibilities. So this is almost a case where there's over disclosure. So there's too much disclosure at the bottom. We all have signed a mortgage document or some type of legal document. If you get it lost in the disclosure, the required piece is actually not as valuable. And FINRA's calling that out here. Yes, they met the requirement, but too much information for the user to be able to focus in on it and actually get the disclosure that's required based on this type of advertisement. The second one here is a much more limited ad. So if you look there to the right, you can see the ad kind of jumps off the paper. You have your light bulb. You have a little bit of disclosure there at the bottom. You have the website link. FINRA says the advertiser promotes innovative companies and the disclosure is sufficient. Innovation securities are subject to risk and including the loss of principal. So if you look here to the right, you can actually see this is their disclosure. It's prominently displayed. It's right on the right side of the page. It really jumps off versus the prior one we looked at where it was really buried in the bottom. But FINRA is actually calling out that this is a good disclosure. It's sufficient. And when you're approving these, you need to know how to look at them. And here's another one. So this is the last example that FINRA had. It's within the marketing message itself. So you can see here the ETF fund, a new way to reach your destination. And they actually include the disclosure right below it. It's very prominent. So the phrase, while not guaranteed in this message, its main body examples how a short disclosure can be incorporated in the message. The problem with a lot of the social media posts that you see is the number of characters you can have in there. Or when you start thinking of a TikTok, right, the amount of time you have for those videos. So to make sure you get the disclosure, you may have to shorten it, but you want to make sure you're still hitting your point here. So this is a great regulatory notice. It's really beneficial. It's helpful to train your staff who are looking at these messages. And you can even train your agents or anyone in marketing who's writing this. I've shared it with my team many times. I think it's a good to be able to see how FINRA's calling out that, yes, we're still meeting the requirement here by this short disclosure. And then that first disclosure we looked at was very long, but didn't hit the mark, right? It was a little bit too much information. So now let's look at regulatory actions. So you can see here the SEC has actually put out a social media alert on fraud. They encourage people to be skeptical and never take investment decisions based solely on information from social media platforms or apps. They don't want you to be swayed by testimonials or celebrity endorsements when making a decision. And then fraudsters will sometimes play people. So we've actually had this happen where an individual that was registered with a firm, they actually saw a picture of themselves listed as on a social media site. Someone actually gone in and stole their image and was holding themselves out to be that person. You can actually do that on social media. They could be touting the investment on social media, but not actually be that person. So it's really important to do your homework when you see that. So those fraudsters impersonate legitimate brokers or investment advisors or other source in the market. They may set up the account profile. You could always go out and Google yourself, right? See if you've actually got any profiles out there that have been set up as social media as you or for your firm. I know that our firm at one point, going to you Google, you look, there are sometimes profiles out there that are not actually approved, and you have to work with those social media vendors to get those taken down. But it's important you do that because you don't want an individual to believe that that's information being put out by your firm or yourself. So this SEC alerts out there, and they're putting out alerts based on what they're seeing. We're seeing a lot of different things in the industry with people trying to take over and really generate revenue based off these social media recommendations. So you can see that in 2002, there was a fine. They actually fined 8 social media influencers for stock schemes. They were promoted on Discord and Twitter. And as frequently as this year, so in 2024, they charged a firm for an influencer's role in connection with the ETF launch. They agreed to pay $1.7 million in penalties and settled charges because it failed to disclose a social media's influence in the launch of its new ETF fund. So these are pretty big fines. So making sure that you're doing this up front, you're getting all that information and actually reviewing what an influencer is saying because you're actually attached to that person now. And they have not stopped looking at this information. You can see that as fact in 2024, we're still seeing fines come out for this. And you can see here the activity is covered under the scope of the marketing rule. If the firm disallows advertising from hypothetical performance and products to mass audiences. So anything put on social media would be considered a mass audience, right? You can't really limit your audience when it's on social media. The SEC marketing rule is relatively new, and it does have pretty broad scope, and we're starting to see more fines come up out of the rule. So making sure that any social media post you have complies with that marketing rule is very important. And if you have any influencers that you're using for your firm, that their activity is actually covered under that rule. So another alert, so this one is relatively new also. So you can see in January of 24, FINRA issued an investor alert. They said since fall of 2023, FINRA has made a significant spike in investor complaints resulting from recommendations made by fraudulent investor groups promoted through social media channels. Complaints received by FINRA and posted on social media describe bad actors posing as registered investment advisors who initially advertised stock investment groups on Instagram or other social media channels and then turned into encrypted chats messaging such as WhatsApp to communicate with the interested investors and pitch investments. In some cases, investors have even themselves encrypted chats directly without any prior contact. So this is a relatively new alert. WhatsApp is, it's really popping up. You will see if you actually you'll actually see investor alerts come out all the time. FINRA is really making sure that investors know who they're dealing with here. It can be difficult. As we said, this misrepresentation of people holding themselves out. And when we looked at the prior grouping here, remember we had 58% of the individuals are getting some of their investment advice from social media. Making sure that you're validating that to make sure that this is not a scam or such as FINRA showing here. Or an investment group is actually real is very important to protect investors. And FINRA's put these investor notices out there. These can be shared with your customers to let people know. And we post them on your webpage, for example, to make sure that they're actually only following valid advice. So FINRA did an investor sweep for Finfluencers in 2021. I did include some of the questions here because it's important to think about how your firm or how you handle social media. So I'll call out a couple of these just because I think they're interesting. So it talks about the use of third party. With any third party marketing, remember, you become entangled with that person. So they wanted firms to describe how they use third party vendors or influencers to use social media communication. If they use any, they want them to provide all the engagement letters, how they compensate those people. Are they driven by number of posts or any information? Can they identify any non-written agreement? So basically a verbal agreement with a person to promote your firm on social media. And then how you look at the background of that person. So unlike those of us who are registered, right, I've had to take a number of exams with FINRA. I have to take annual continuing education. These individuals may not be registered, right? They may just actually be marketing type individuals out there. So what is that person's background? How do you feel that they can actually provide valuable information to your customers. And then identify any potential, how do you recruit them? And then any content, right? So we talked about books and records. So all of that content should be part of your books and records. So if there are emails or any communications that were sent out, you need to provide copies of those. So those need to be retained. So that was part of the initial sweep. We'll go through a little bit more, the referral programs. So if there's a referral program, so if there's an influencer out there that's actually trying to get referrals to your customer, vendor wanted the details of that information. So how were they included? And again, back to that books and records. So if they had any data, they actually wanted copies of it. So including any emails to firm customers or any other communication by that influencer. And then they had a general information. So they wanted to see social media communications by outside parties related to your firm, including the method or activity, use of marketing or affiliate relationships, or those referral programs. So how do you have procedures governing these? So vendor actually will post all of their suite programs on their website. It's a really good tool to make sure that you do have your policies and procedures to meet these. So you'll see here they actually expected to have policies and procedures on these 3 items here. They also want to see your training. Training is critical, right? We want to train on what you can post, what you can't, what requires pre-approval, what does not. So that any training materials, how the firm communicates with outside entities, and then state whether the firm required influencers to have any reward programs or referral programs, and if they do attend training, right? So typically these influencers are not employed by your firm, right? But you may want to have them do training even though they're not part of your organization, because you want to make sure they're lining up with the regulations, because you are tied to this individual if you're using them. So they go through the referral programs pretty good. So in 2023, so they did the sweep in 2021, they reach out to firms, they gather information, and this is basically what they came up with afterwards. So they want to make sure that you consider and evaluate practices for an influencer referral. Your WSPs really need to include differentiating between social media influencer referral programs, including additional controls for social media influencers with large social media presence, as well as additional requirements for programs managed by member firms, affiliates, or marketing agencies. Some of those individuals may have hundreds of thousands of followers. Those are going to be different ranges of investors. So you need to make sure that you have a program that if you are using an affiliate like that, that they can actually meet all of the obligations for different types of individuals. You want to address their compensation. No one is out there, marketing for free. You see these individuals, YouTube, for example, a lot of their followers, they're making significant amount of money off this. So how are you addressing their compensation? And then make sure that your WSPs are regularly tested. There could be industry changes. There could be changes in platforms. Our policies list some of the top platforms right now, but we do evaluate to make sure that when we don't just say social media, we say social media, including LinkedIn, Twitter. We did go back in and add TikTok, right? So individuals are thinking about that when they're disclosing it. You'll never be able to capture every platform. There could be a new one next week, but making sure you're calling out so the individuals know exactly what you're looking for there, and that you're gathering all that data, and that there is a solution in there to meet your books and records requirements. One of the items that comes up frequently is that a new platform may not be allowed to be used for this, for your investment needs, because they may not have a technology solution to meet the books and records requirements. Or the vendor may just say, no, I don't want to actually meet that. That was true with Snapchat. Snapchat actually wanted to keep all the data private. So a lot of firms had to prohibit use of Snapchat because we couldn't actually archive the data and meet our books and records requirement. Same when TikTok was new, right? There wasn't a way to really easily get that data in and meet your books and records requirements for it. So you're going to have to evaluate the platform to make sure that you can actually meet your compliance obligations. And with a new platform, it may not be available when it first comes out. Now, your more business-oriented platforms like LinkedIn, they have everything set up. There are many vendors out there that can actually archive the data, pull information in. But you want to make sure you're really evaluating each platform and do your due diligence to make sure that you can actually meet your regulatory obligations. So you can see here that they want to evaluate the public and social media activities for compliance and reputational risk before admitting them to your program. So there is a reputational risk. If they're actually marketing on your behalf, Many people in the public may actually, feel that that person is connected to your firm. So even though they're not registered, they're not an employee, if they're actually out there marketing to you, you are tied to them based on the reputation. And then maintaining those records, as we talked about, this is a big fine. SEC will require that you have all that data in there, and failure to meet your record keeping obligations is pretty heavy on the when you look at the amount of money that firms have been fined. So I did want to leave some time for questions at the end. I know we kind of went through it quickly, or we can always circle back to something. Mary Ellen, do you want to open it up for questions or see if we have any in the chat?
Yeah, I'll take a peek here and see.
So if anyone
Nope.
wants to go off mute, you can ask questions now. You can raise your hand. I actually can't see everyone that's in here. So if you want to go off mute or drop it in the chat, we can address any questions now.
It's very thorough, and it was such a different perspective than what I'm accustomed to. I mean, I know there's always risk with let me fix my camera there. Sorry, risks with social media and getting relationship with other people or sharing links and saying, I want to put you on my website. Can you link me to yours? And it's gotten so big and confusing. I'm really sort of glad I'm not in your line of work. I'm gonna say for sure I know I am, because I'm gonna have to watch this all over again to grasp all that. That was very, very informative, fresh approach to it. People are probably still digesting it. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. I guess we can probably give you guys back a little time today, but I would like to thank Anne for sharing her expertise with us on this ongoing industry concern, and for being a friend to SILA and the SILA Foundation. We appreciate you and your time this afternoon. And as a reminder, our webinars are free of charge and open to the public. Sharing our invitations is appreciated. And we ask you to please watch and complete the post-webinar survey, and plan to join us next Thursday, same time, same bat channel, for our third annual fireside chat. This year we'll be welcoming outgoing NASA President Claire McHenry. It's not one to miss. And that registration will be opening soon. When I see everybody, oh yes, I know. We thank you, and it's very informative. I mean, I'm telling you, people are still processing what they took.
Thank you.
If anybody has questions after the fact, you can shoot it to me and I can get it over to Anne for you. Oh, and I wanted to let you know that I will pull the links out of those PowerPoint slides, and I'll add those to where you're going to find when you get that email with the survey, there's going to be a link to the recording, and it'll also be where you can find the handout and also those links that she was referring to. So, okay. I think that's it. We'll give everybody 27 minutes back to their day. Thank you for joining us. We hope we see you next Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody. Bye.